how it came to be, and what have you. Is that
Yeah,
right?
it's recording. So,
okay, cool.
Maybe you can just go ahead and explain the roles of the different people, Martin, Joe Bob, yourself, who had what control, who did what, and later on.
Eclipse was an idea that me and Martin came up with a couple years ago. He had stopped running NFW shows, which is kind of a little backyard thing that he was running with Joe Bob years ago here in Zephyr Hills when they were still on I guess that's 301 out there. And we decided we're going to run a wrestling company. I came up with the idea for Eclipse, which would be more like a Japanese type company, something akin to Hustle, something like that. And we got the opportunity when a week before Christmas, Joe Bob came up to us and asked us to start running shows. We really weren't prepared, didn't have any money in our pockets, and just started putting this wrestling show together on the fly. The booking was kind of done on a team basis then, Me and Martin would sit down and just really look at the workers we had available, who we thought were coming out, and from there we'd go ahead and start putting our card together. Joe Bob, like this, I guess this is the fun part. Joe Bob, as much as he did help us get going, because had it not been for him being like, hey, I have a building, you guys want to run a show, like we really wouldn't have been running anything when we did, and probably still wouldn't be running anything today. It was the cheapest building around, but he was a roadblock to a lot of it. There was a lot of people who threatened to leave because of the way he was acting. He got involved in the creative aspects, which really another hand in the pot just wasn't necessary. And there was times where he just took way too much money. The deal was always changing. He always wanted more money. But I mean, he did do some good for us. He was providing his ring. It was his building. A lot of the equipment, the curtains and stuff like that, he'd come out of pocket for, flyers. So, I mean, kind of a love-hate relationship there. Like, one week would be like, man, look, Joe Bob really came through for us. And then, as we were collecting chairs at the end of the night, Friday night, it was like, God, do we have to put up with this asshole for any longer?
Okay, so tell me a little bit about the promotion aspect. I think there was a few people that... in different interviews, there's different people, whether it's Dirk Manning or Martin or George or whoever, who were talking about the actual promoting the show out in Zephyr Hills and who was supposed to do it and who didn't do it and that sort of thing.
It was supposed to be a team effort as much as possible, but what was really hard is a lot of us aren't located in this area. You know what I mean? Martin lived out here, Dirk lived out here, Joe Bob lived out here, and so they did a lot of promoting for us. They did a great job. Whenever I was out here, and for a little while I was even staying out here, we went out and we kicked ass with promoting, and every time we did, you could see the results by the growing crowds and whatnot. As far as promotions is concerned, man, I mean, I think it was kind of a mess. Most of it was from word of mouth or from the internet. And we had a loyal fan base, but it really, I don't think it was as big as anybody really wanted it to be. There were weeks when it was just like, wow, you could see this thing growing, and then it just kind of died down, and it'd be the normal 30, 40 people out there that came every week anyway, regardless. So it was supposed to be divvied up, and it really just fell on the shoulders of a couple of guys, and after a while, I think it started to mount on them, and you could see they kind of had a hesitance to go ahead and do all the work for everybody else.
Okay. Can you tell me about how the name PWE came about?
Eclipse, like I said, and PWE, everybody likes to call that. Martin likes to call it that, but the original idea was it was just Eclipse. I'm a big fan of Japanese wrestling, and so I was watching a lot of Hustle and Dragon Gate and stuff like that, and I loved how they just had these one-name promotions, you know what I mean, and or Chikara even, and so I was like, what if we just called it Eclipse? And I was always running around calling it Pro Wrestling Eclipse, just so people didn't, confuse it with gum or cars or whatever else is named Eclipse. And I guess it just stuck. People started saying PWE, people started chanting it, the boys started calling it, and after a while I just kind of threw my hands in the air and said, what the fuck, it's Pro Wrestling Eclipse, whatever.
What about the spelling and the capitalization on the Eclipse?
Again, I was sitting down one day at work when I should have been doing something else, and I was just dreaming up this idea, and we had been talking about it for a little while, and obviously I didn't want it to be like everything else. I didn't want to have the C in it, and a friend of mine and me were talking about it, and he drew up a rough sketch, and I was like, that's perfect, and it just kind of stuck. I showed it to Martin, and after that, he was sold on it, and we decided to run with it.
Okay. And whenever you can, if you'll rephrase kind of the question or whatever you're answering, that way I can cut myself out of the video so it's more about you and less about me.
Okay.
can you tell me about the hybrid championship, either the lineage of the title or what the idea was behind it, and some of the matches, anything you want to talk about?
That's another idea that we have been talking about, like as far as the hybrid division's concerned. Right? That was an idea we have been talking about for a little bit. Again, I love Japanese wrestling, and I wanted to do something that was either based on age limits, kind of like they do in Japan with like the Young Lions stuff, or something that just totally defied conventions on like lightweight wrestling. Obviously I'm not a lightweight per se, but you'd see me competing up there, and it was the kind of wrestling that we were all watching at the time. We were watching stuff from Jersey, and there were these bigger guys doing these littler guy things, and so we decided, what if there was a competitive branch where even these bigger guys can go out and kind of do it, kind of like the X Division. We did kind of rip that off, the early idea for the X Division in TNA, and just decided to start running with it. As far as the lineage, I mean, I thought we had like great champions. A lot of guys I wish I would have been able to see compete for the belt, maybe even hold and run with the title, But Josh Rain, I think we were all like ecstatic about Josh holding the title, and that really being like a platform for him. After that, I mean, Josh is everywhere now. Aaron Epic, who I've always had great respect for, like even when I started on the indie circuit. Me holding it, I don't know how the hell that happened, but it was a good run. It was a lot of fun, man, and just an idea that we decided to come up with that really stuck. There was a lot more rules to it than I think people were aware of. At first, Martin in his old company had a title he called the International Intensity title, I2 title. And I think he meant I squared, but whatever. It was the I2 title. And I had come up with a bunch of rules for that talked about like ROH's Pure title, where there was so many rope breaks per match. And then after that, like submissions in the ropes were legal. 20 counts on the outside as opposed to 10. And just a way to really like differentiate it. And I think the refs weren't prepared. The boys weren't prepared, and we never really put it out there to the audience, and so those rules kind of just fell by the wayside over time.
Awesome. Can you tell me about why the hardcore title? What's the name of it again? Sorry.
That's funny. The ultra violent title.
Sorry, yeah, I keep forgetting, but the ultra violent title. Can you tell me why it was? Because I asked a lot of people about that title, and then I guess I didn't even realize as a fan that it had been kind of combined with the heavyweight championship. Can you talk about that?
So, in regards to the ultra violent title, there's a lot of controversy. Martin really wanted the title, and he thought we had the guys to work the style, and there were a few guys. But that first match, I kind of felt like it was a title that could kind of go either way. And after like the performance of that first match, Dagan Lee had gotten hurt that match, and we were supposed to put the strap on him. Pretty Fly had won the title, and he was supposed to be leaving in a couple of weeks. There was a kid who came down from Jersey who worked for it. It was just kind of god awful, and that match was just like a clusterfuck from beginning to end. And I said, they really tried to sell me on this idea of people want to see hardcore wrestling, people want to see people die, and they want to see it all the time, every week. And I really wasn't sold on the idea, but I said, sure, if we can get something like what CZW does to kind of like broaden our horizons, sure, I'm cool with it, I'm game. And then we put it on Mandrake, who's known as a hardcore wrestling, and this is probably more our fault than his, but he was never in hardcore matches, like we didn't have the money to buy the gimmicks for it. We weren't paying him enough to go out there and gig and die all the time, and it kind of like fell by the wayside to me. So there was some ruffling in the booking, and Martin needed to take some personal time off, so I took over booking full time. And one of the decisions I had made was that we were going to combine the hardcore or the ultra violent title, and the world title. Biff was supposed to work Michael Patrick that night, and Mike Patrick just took off 10-15 minutes before his match, storming off about the finish. And so I decided, well, we have Eddie Brock and we don't have Jay Brock, so let's put Eddie in a match with Biff and see what happens. We'll have Eddie drop the title, and then he'll start a single run from there. Well, Biff really likes titles, and I don't know if it comes off as such, I don't know if it's apparent, but for him, the prospect of unifying the titles kind of became this idea of holding two titles. And him getting to walk around with shiny things, I think, was more than he could pass up. And so after he won that match, I don't think the titles were actually broken up, but they just kind of moved with whoever became the new world champion after that. Okay. So yeah.
Okay, no, that's perfect. Because yeah, actually, as I started to put together the documentary, I didn't realize what happened with the Ultraviolent title. Because when I got there, it was already gone. And I was like, oh yeah, the Ultraviolent, you need to talk about that and talk about the Mandrake matches. And Mandrake started just talking about it for quite a while. And then I was like, I need to do my research on this. What's the story behind this?
Well, just to kind of put a cap on it and what have you, like we started trying to get smarter booking going and not just to do things just to do things. I mean, we did enough of that with the hybrid division, but like hardcore every week, I just thought kind of like started to bore the crowd and they started to resent it almost. Like, why are you trying to push this down my throat? I'm really not buying it. And like watching the O'Toole Simon Says feud, that you could really tell that there was something important going on there. There was blood, yeah, there was violence, but it was all leading to something, or it was culminating something, and I was really trying to use that aspect in the booking all the way across the board. So, as opposed to, hey, we have one guy who's going to go out there and fight hardcore every week, what if we built up a superb feud, and then we go ahead and we throw a ladder in, or we go ahead and we throw barbed wire in, and I just thought it was a smart booking decision.
Right. So speaking of booking decisions, why was Believe brought in?
Believe was brought in because Martin had made a connection with them, and at first we had talked a lot about just not being the normal indie company. That was really one of our fears. It was something I didn't want to do because the normal indie companies are fine, they were doing their thing, but my horizons were bigger. I wanted to do something bigger than Believe. No offense. And Martin had started talking with them, and I guess he got kind of starstruck. This idea of, hey, we're going to get a bunch of really big names in, and we got somebody like MSL helping us out. He used to work for the Fed, and, it was just too much to pass up, and he really jumped on it. And when he first started telling me about the deal, the details were a little bit different than they actually wound up being. I don't really want to go over money or anything like that on camera, but the details were just different than what we had initially talked about. So it was Martin's decision initially, and then we started running with it because we saw some of the potential, and we thought there was a lot of booking potential too. Crossovers, titles being defended at different shows that really never went anywhere, and then the Heartbreak Express coming in and kind of taking over booking for a little while, which I thought was just a real bummer, man, a real travesty. Like we kind of had our crowds pegged, we kind of knew what they liked. And at that point, man, I have to really defend Martin. The booking was being split between Sean Davis and Martin. And Martin was coming out with these great ideas, And those matches went over, superb. And then Sean Davis would come up with something, and, we'd run with it because we told him we would. We told him we'd give him some time to try things out. And really it always wound up biting us in the ass because, like, the crowd didn't like it. We didn't like it. It messed up a lot of our storylines. And I really, towards the end, I think a lot of people started to feel it too, like the politics and how it was affecting the guys who were here busting their ass every week, as opposed to these guys who were being given these spots just because of, like, their name recognition when, no offense to any of those guys, they're great workers, but, like, frankly, they're not like these superstars that we really had to tear down our entire product for.
I think just in talking with people, particularly last night, I talked with what was called the FWE group, the Simon and Aaron and Bobby Fonta and a few of that crowd.
Biff and all those guys came at the same time.
And they all seemed, if there's probably a better word, but a little bit bitter just about, we worked here, we tried so hard, and then the Believe guys all got put over above us.
Well, like, one thing about that entire crew, the FWA crew, if you will, like, and we talked about this extensively, is they were like my crew, who we call the Arbondale crew. It was a bunch of guys that wouldn't be given a shot by anybody else because, like, of their size or because of where they were trained or who they were trained by, And yet these guys were all phenomenal workers. And when I say the Arbondale crew, it consists mostly of myself, Dagan Lee, Michael O'Toole, Josh Rain, for a little while, Juvie D, while he was still around. But guys like that had, Eddie Brock and Jay Brock, I don't want to forget them. But we all came up together, and like, this was kind of an outlet for us. Like, man, look at what we can do. We belong up here with the top indie talent, and eventually, it was great to see Simon and those guys and our guys, working alongside, like, guys like Jarrell Clark, working alongside guys like Puma, and, I think it was just kind of sad that all of us got pushed to the side. For the Believe guys, who I guess you could say had bigger indie names than us, but definitely didn't have the same buzz, and I don't think had the same work ethic. And they just didn't work as hard as both of those groups. So,
you can answer this question with a different answer than everyone else, but I want to give you. It seems like the video is leading one way. Is when I ask people who were the people that really benefited most from PWE, and the name that the first 7 people said in a row was Josh Rain really benefited because it made his career. So you have 2 options. Pretty much I've just renamed the chapter to Josh Rain, but you can either tell me about other people that benefited, or if you just want to take a minute and just talk about Josh Rain and how PWE benefited him.
Well, something that really pisses me off, because it still comes up today, PWE's talked about like a joke.
Hang on one sec, sorry. I was talking over you, so if you just want to start over to her.
Okay.
Go ahead.
In regards to PWE, a lot of people talk about it like it was a joke. They shit on it. The boys still to this day like, oh, this is a PWE-sized crowd. When, really, for a weekly show, we were pulling pretty consistently. Like, even if you look at the weekly shows that are running now, not to mention any names, we're still outdrawing them. People shit on it, but it springboarded a lot of people. Just from doing the Eclipse shows, I was getting booked, everywhere. Josh Rain was absolutely getting booked everywhere. But even guys like Simon, Biff, Bobby, they were doing their shows here and there, but a lot of people didn't want to take risk on them. Simon, who's like this incredible mouthpiece, but also a phenomenal wrestler, people just kept seeing him as a manager. Oh, this guy needs to be on the mic. This guy needs to be on the mic. And, health concerns notwithstanding, like, we were one of the first companies that was really like, no, let's give this guy a go and let's just make him this ginormous, gigantic heel, and I think that it did wonders for Simon. I think it did wonders for Bobby, who I think was so underrated, and just a plethora of other guys, and I'm sad that we don't even have that springboard anymore. I think that's one of the hardest parts for me, to see these young undiscovered talents who have to fight their way through an indie scene that's loaded with politics. It's all about who you know. And if work ethic is any proof, then the guys that were springboarded from that, should have been, on top 3-4 years ago, instead of having to, really mark their own territory and fight their way into other shows.
Okay. The last question that I have kind of pre-staged for you is if you can, and then you can just talk about whatever you want, but can you talk about kind of the behind-the-scenes leaders other than the obvious ones, kind of?
Well, there was I think this might be one of the biggest reasons for the downfall of Eclipse, I'll be honest, that behind the scenes, there was a lot of hands in the pot at different times and for different reasons. And I think a lot of bickering, and myself not excluded from this. We made alliances and different people were brought into book, and a lot of times I think it really hurt us. For a little while, Aaron Epic was helping with the book. For a little while, we had Michael O'Toole helping with the book. For a little while, we had Ray Snow helping with the book. And it was always just these different people being brought in, and it really got away from Eclipse's initial vision. And I think there was a lot of people who were in everybody's ears. You know what I mean? George Martel, case in point. Everybody wanted some say in how we should have run this company, when I think really from the beginning, me and Martin should have just put our foots down and said, no, this is how we're going to run things. And then any internal disputes should have been, settled amongst ourselves. I think a lot of the reason for the success of the product was we have very different viewpoints on wrestling. I do like the Japanese product. I do like, indie wrestling. Martin, for the most part, does like, WWE and old WCW. And so, when you put those two together, you got a big show, you got big, fantastic storylines, and you had, hard-hitting, high-flying action. And I think those two elements combined made for great wrestling, and everybody else, coming in, there was just way too many chefs in the kitchen.
And I've actually... The common answer I got was, and people actually use the term, too many hands in the cookie jar got used by 3 or 4 people. So
yeah,
I think that's,
and people trying to put themselves over. I mean, let's be honest. There was guys who tried to use this as a way to get their guys over, get their friends, in positions, put belts on themselves, and it just really kind of. At the end of the day, you're just oh, wow. Was I just taken for a ride? And it happened more than I'd like to admit.
Yeah. Well, I've got 20 minutes of footage, and I've got it's hopefully gonna all boil down to about an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, there's gonna be stuff that I can use and stuff that I won't be able to use. But you have just kind of the forum to talk about anything you want right now.
Okay.
If there's anything else.
Yeah. No, like so let me ask you, what's the what kind of is the story you're telling behind the clips?
I guess I'm trying not to tell any story particularly. I'm just trying to give the history. So, there's different chapters. One chapter is just going to be different people talk, kind of everybody's little segment about the leadership of PWE. One's going to be the like I said, the Michael Toole, Simon Says feud. One's going to be the Gangstas and the James Boys feud. One's going to be how Believe came in. One's going to be kind of just about what I termed the PWE originals and bringing in the FWE guys and how that affected the product. One chapter is going to be I'm trying to think, what are the other ones? Let's see, the leadership.
Did you go
the why it doesn't run today is another chapter.
Okay.
And if you want to talk about that one, you can. But it's essentially me asking a question and hearing 10 to 15 people give a minute or so of what their answer is.
Right.
So,
well, did you go over at all like the controversy about the heavyweight title with Jude? I don't know if you were here for that.
No, it was before me, so I haven't really asked about it. And I haven't got a chance to interview Jude. So,
well, like it was kind of a mess. It was the day Biff won the title.
Mm-hmm.
We were running this angle between Jude and Torture. And I think we just tried to go way too big. We did video segments, and we were just putting it off. And like Torture would go running out of the building. And we were trying to run this huge story, but then Torture would miss every couple of weeks, you know what I mean? Just take off for no reason. Why weren't you here? I don't know, man. I decided to stay home instead. And then, like, Jude was obliged to the church shows once a month. And so we're trying to work between their two schedules and put together, like, this really grandiose story. And we thought, like, a cool component would be, hey, we have this giant guy that people really like watching in the Biff, you know? Why don't we try injecting him in there a little bit, you know what I mean? And we had planned this segment out where Torture's out there with Jude. At this point, Torture, who had been working with Mark Zout, they're a tag team some other places, he comes out to make the save, and Torture does the big turn. Oh, no, he's working with Jude. And, it was a clever turn, and it was a big reveal. And so we sent Biff out there to make the big save. No big deal. He runs out, and Jude, powders, and he comes to the back. And all of a sudden, somebody comes through the curtain and says, hey, Biff said to come back out. And I'm going, wait, we didn't tell you to go back out. Stay out here. And he's like, well, Martin said it. And, Martin was out in the front doing the commentary or whatever. And I'm like, well, if Martin said it, go back out. Maybe he's going to challenge you on the mic or something. Well, the next thing I know, I hear the ref counting 1, 2, 3. And Biff comes back with the belt around his shoulder. And I'm like, what the hell just happened? Like, did somebody decide to...
Who was the champion to begin with?
Jude.
Jude was? Okay.
And Jude comes back maybe a half hour later, 45 minutes later. And he's just really upset, like doesn't want to talk about it. And I'm like, what the hell happened out there? Torture storms off, you know what I mean? Pissed off. And we actually lost a bunch of guys from this. I guess what you could call the third crowd, the FPWA crowd. Like, we lost a lot of them because of this. And a lot of them thought that we sent Biff out there to, like, take the title from Jude. I mean, like, there was a lot of controversy. We had a problem the week before where, I guess... inadvertently somebody didn't kick out, and so Mark Zout wound up winning the belt, and it was just like this big mess. And so Biff wins the title, and I'm back there, and I just want to rip him a new asshole. Like, why did you take the belt? And this is kind of what I was alluding to earlier about him being a fan of belts. And when we sat down and talked about it, we hadn't had like a steady champion for over 2 or 3 shows. It had gotten really ridiculous, and it was like, well, the good thing about him being so big is nobody's going to take this title away from him unless he wants them to. And we decided to just squash it and run with it like it was planned. But, like, still to this day, I mean, like, Jude came back and started working with us again, and which I was really glad about. But a lot of guys wouldn't. And Jude still felt really, like, hurt about the entire situation. And, it's something that I really regret, and I wish I kind of would have been a little bit firmer on. But that's just some of the wackiness that went on around there.
That's actually one of the chapters was people leaving. And that'll fit perfectly. I mean, I'll put in, kind of, because I think kind of the question, and the question changes a little bit each time, but I mean, it's basically a lot of people left and never came back, and then there's also a lot of people that left and came back, and kept going back, and it seems like that's going to fit in perfectly.
Well, I mean, like, to even talk more about that, we had a lot of guys who were with us from the beginning and just either didn't work with our style, didn't work in with our financial obligations, and then there was other guys who just kind of, it was nice surprises to have them around, but considering a lot of their schedules, they couldn't come back.